No, we don't have to, but we'll come back to this court's staff criteria in a few minutes. And it was about discuss what is meant by documents. I'm talking about, we've got data we're going to analyze. We just stick to it. If people want, I can cover these sort of things, but let's go back to something that I believe is more important. Common forms of data, personal data, official documents. Someone mentioned using secondary data a while ago. I said be extra careful, and I'll keep saying that again. Things about official documents, mass media documents that you can get from outside, another word. Fact documents and other things. I would just skip to what I believe is important as far as the research that we are going to do is concerned, right? So some implicit things that we've mentioned today, right? As far as the data that you get is concerned. As far as the data you get is concerned, one, is your data genuine? I'll go for that, right? And we're going with Scott's 4 criteria, but I'm mapping it to your research data that you are collecting. Is it credible? Basically, is it free from errors and distortion? And I think we've just given ourselves a good example where we mentioned the Chinese whisper side of things. Yeah. So pretty much wherever possible, remember that you as a researcher, you're kind of going in as an observer, really. If we want to hear only your point of view, there's no point doing the research at all. Unless, of course, you are doing an action research or a reflective kind of research where you are reflecting on your work. Then in that case, you know where the source of information is coming from and you're going for secondary data to support your own findings. Or unless you're a computer scientist and you are designing something and you want to present the outcome of that. But even so, even that there are benchmarks that you compare your results with to say that this was my idea, this is my contribution, this is how my contribution matches to that of existing work. And mostly computer science and engineering and specific kind of research are like that. Yeah? Okay. Right. So is the evidence typical of its kind? So it's an interesting thing. Recently, what's the thing that's is it oximeter or whatever it's called? For measuring oxygen in people's hands and other things. I think I've made that reference to that before. If I haven't, I can happily make that as well. Now, we're recording, so okay, right. Basically, your data and the data you're collecting, is it clear, is it meaningful, is it comprehensive? You mentioned as clear as possible. And again, the same goes for your analysis, right? I know researchers, we love to hear certain keywords, right? And especially if you come to my field, it's crazy. You have to take this English and translate all of them to equations and algorithms and other things. But that's the language that my people speak, right? In terms of my research community. And at the same time, I should be in a position where I should be able to present my research to the general community and they will also understand, right? So your target audience, especially in terms of where you're publishing it to, but especially with some key data, it needs to be presented in as clear as possible in terms of the use of language diction and other things, right? But then you come to me with some aspects or some research submissions and I say, you've only written English, right? This is an academic writing. So sometimes it depends on your field, which is why when we started, I say, download a paper from your field, read it, and then see their style of writing as you write your work. Does it make sense? Yeah. So unless someone actually immerses themselves in their field, let's say Zach is peer reviewing your work, right? And he's so immersed in computer science related research, for example, he will be asking you things like, where's your algorithm, where's your other things? You don't use these terminologies and all those kind of things. And may even skip research question altogether because we don't normally use research question in our writing. And maybe mix methodology together. He will probably ask you system model and other stuff because we don't use that altogether. And you just say, okay, my peer-reviewed work is perfect because this person who's reviewed it says that everything is perfect. But meanwhile, as far as this particular topic is concerned, you would have missed some key things. So even though writing, making it really clear and comprehensible is concerned, as far as presenting your research writing, especially when it comes to the academic context, please know your audience. Yeah. And this may sound like for the future, if you intend to publish, right? And actually, it's the first time you publish into a particular journal, book, or something. I'll just say spend some time. You don't have to read the whole thing. Spend some time to look at a paper they've recently accepted. Because it will give you a sense of, look at the images they use. How original were those images? How many times did they cite other people's images? And if you realize none, then the images that you need to generate yourself, you generate yourself. And actually, most of the time, you generate the image yourself, right? Okay, look at their tables. How much information does it give you? Look at the way they've presented their results, right? Look at the way, how deep they've gone with that. Look at the terminologies they use. Look at how many papers they've cited. Look at the sources of papers they've cited, for example. Is your best go-to when it comes to actually presenting to a particular place. Yeah? Yes. Good. So going a bit more into things, we will pretty much finish this in a much quicker way. Scenario 1 task. And I will pause here. So we've skipped quite a few things, and it's taken us to this particular slide here, which is talking about, qualitative data analysis. We're about to wrap up somewhere here, and basically the key point to note from this one that unlike qualitative data, there's no clear cut in terms of rules about qualitative materials and how they should be analyzed, right? Because if you have quantitative, you're thinking about the number of participants and other things. It's like, it's a positivist perspective of life. The fact that reality is absolute and can be measured, yeah? Whilst qualitative, we are actually saying that there is a human factor in there. You can't really predict people. Because of that, the data itself is probably not replicable in terms of reaching the same set of conclusion, because it depends on the people and other things. Yeah? Yes. Good. Right. So anyway, however, there are some basic techniques in terms of common practices when it comes to analyzing the data or the approach. And we've already established something like a common grounds with regards to identifying themes and working with themes, of course. And we mentioned categorization earlier. We mentioned labeling, right? So basically just coding the data. So if you know what particular things mean, then of course. There are different ways of analyzing the data in terms of techniques based on themes or categories, or establishing some specific themes, which we have walked through earlier. Hopefully we'll see some examples soon. And well, anyway, coding method of identifying things, so basically having a starting point that can have many forms of the qualitative analysis. You can read through all this boiling stuff, but basically, if we mentioned earlier about relating some specific things to something like happiness, for example, the information is there, so you smile. Right? You can read for yourself, but we mentioned some specific things about if, let's say, different people are giving you feedback in terms of your interview or giving you data, and you can establish common themes. So when you are looking through the data, or when you are using tools, like some tools like in Vivo, you can actually tag that particular session with certain keywords. So you are more or less coding the data, taking something that is said in one form and then labeling it with another thing in a way that you can group several data together and can be identified by. Pretty much. Yes. What? That's not a question. I'm trying to read it. Yeah, cool. Right. So we can go a bit more into details, how to carry out thematic analysis. Familiarize yourself with the data. If you understand the data, it's easier to analyze it. If you have done a transcript, of course, you'll be reading through your transcribed data. And I said earlier, like I prefer to basically, whilst doing the interview, especially if I have multiple researchers doing the same interview, like the one I mentioned earlier, there are like 3 of us doing it. And normally right after the interview, we have discussion with the participants because we're talking about issues that need preserved. So after we collect the data in a way, in this purest form, we have discussion with the participant. But among ourselves, we also talk about some of the common themes that are coming up. So we've sort of done a sort of pre-data analysis even before we look at the actual data. So at the back of our mind, we know some of the common things that are coming out. So it's interesting because this participant said this, the other participant said that, which is kind of contradict each other. So it's kind of worth looking into. But it's interesting that even though the two of them are saying contradicting things, majority of the people are saying this. Could it be that that participant, there's some form of influence in there? If we are going to do another research or something, it would be interesting to talk to that participant, for example. So already we are kind of assimilating the data, yeah, making deeper understanding of what we are collecting because by the time you finish, it's normally like a couple of weeks or something before you find time to really analyze the data. So wherever possible, just make sure you're really familiar with the data. And one way to not do this is, especially if somebody else collects the data and you are simply going to do the analysis of it, it's just going to be a bit of work overkill because you're going to spend more time to walk through all the materials for the first time. And you really don't know, you're not really familiar with the environment under which this data was collected, especially if it's an interview, for example. Having said that, I'm not saying that you can't get the data collected in that sense. I mean, same example with 3 people. If some of us are not available, others have to go ahead with the data collection anyway, because we are all very, very busy people. Make sense, maybe? Right, so generation of initial codes, searching for common themes, things we've been through, reviewing the themes, defining and naming the themes, and of course, producing your report, which gives you better analysis of the data itself. And hopefully you can see what's on the screen. Zoom in a little bit. So pretty much mentioned the Excel stuff. This is also in a table format where you can group the ones that you believe form under a similar theme or have some certain relationship that you can easily identify. And then of course, identifying the themes under the clusters and using some brief description or brief keywords that you intend to identify for those ones. And I did promise an early finish, so hopefully it wouldn't be a lot more slides for this. So an example in terms of if we are doing, looking at the psychological state, as a cluster 1, things like sadness, being upset, feeling down can be related to being depressed. And if we skip 1, being scared, as somebody did tell us a few minutes ago that they were scared, being scared, being worried, being anxious may be associated with things like fear. If we jump all the way down to things like physical states, we can have things like tiredness, exhausted. It's interesting. These are the keywords we've heard today from you in this class. Exhausted, feeling sleepy can be associated with fatigue. Good appetite, hungry, painful, dizzy, feeling nauseous can be symptoms of something, right? And hopefully this is the point where I will say I'll be happy to wrap up here. And you can have something like a mind map to associate these keywords with each other, where you can visually see things. And last week we did look at innovative ways or creative ways of analyzing or collecting data, and part of it was analyzing. Remember the word cloud with Mendeley? We had where you say you send the questions out, people put in some keywords, and then the words that were achieved the most will look bigger on the word cloud or something like that. And I'm happy to bring my long talking and everything to close at this particular point on this.